Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 2025 OpenColorIO Virtual Town Hall with the Academy Software Foundation. My name is Carol Payne, and I am the project chair for OCIO, and I'm here with my colleague and compatriot Doug Walker, who is the chief architect of OpenColorIO, along with Kevin Wheatley, who is one of our OCIO Technical Steering Committee members and a couple other folks that are going to join us for some demos today. Before we jump into the meat of the presentation, we want to make sure that everybody's aware that we've got our full open source days program on August 10th, which is this coming Sunday. It's both in person and virtual out of Vancouver. And it's got lots of amazing events happening, a full, oh, this is the virtual town hall schedule, which is happening right now. This is what you're at, has the rest of this week with lots of other exciting virtual town halls, which are also all recorded. And that's a good note, is that this presentation is being recorded. So we'll be up on YouTube later. Please feel free to ask any questions along the way in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. But also please stay muted so that we can have a great recording. We're really excited for the main program of Open Source Days. It's got 3 exciting keynotes, which you can see here, and also tons of awesome main programming through the whole day. And then on the Monday, we're having all ASWF focused birds of a feather, which are SIGGRAPH presentations and do require SIGGRAPH registration, are in person only. But if you will be in Vancouver next week at SIGGRAPH, we hope to see you there. Lastly, want to make sure that everybody saves the date for September 25th and 26th, depending on what time zone you're in around the world. For our next Dev Days event, you can go ahead and register to participate in Dev Days for all of our projects. It's a great opportunity to contribute for the first time or contribute to a project you haven't contributed to before if you're looking to try something new. All right. With that, we're going to get into the meat of the agenda. As you can see, we've got a ton to get through here. I'm not going to walk through all of this, but safe to say we're going to talk about core library updates, some roadmap things, some ACES updates, configs, and hopefully have a few minutes for Q&A at the end. I want to start, as always, by recognizing and thanking our OCIO Technical Steering Committee. They are an incredible group of people without whom this project would not function. And so credit to these folks for their dedication to our project and also their member companies for their dedication to supporting OCIO. We don't have any new additions to the TSC this year. We've stayed since the last time we talked stable in our TSC composition. So that's great. But as always, we're looking for new folks to get involved. And if you're interested in more of a leadership position, please, sort of speak up. And we look for the folks often contributing to the project and making meaningful impact as additions to our technical steering committee all the time. So we're always evaluating the folks on the TSC and how that works. We've had a busy year. It was really interesting when I was making this slide. I was struggling to kind of get it in a place that sort of made sense because it felt like so much longer than a year that I was trying to fit onto this slide. We've done so much in the last year, more releases than we typically do. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the rest of the presentation. But a few things to point out is that our last release was OCIO 2.4.2, and that happened in the middle of March. And that was our final ACES 2.0 implementation release. We'll talk more about that later. And then the other thing that I'll call out on this is look forward to our next major release, OCIO 2.5, which is VFX platform 2026 planned, and that will come out on September 30th of this year. Other than that, rest of the slide is here for your perusal. Another big thing we'd like to mention is a Slack migration. a lot of you that are familiar with the OCIO project know that we've had our own personal Slack instance for many, many years. It actually predates the existence of the Academy Software Foundation. And so we've maintained that mostly because it's very convenient. We like to be able, we have our group there. We like to be able to communicate with folks. We don't want to inconvenience folks by asking them to move. However, the benefits or the negatives of that have started to outweigh the benefits. And one of the main things that we've noticed is we would like to be able to keep history. And then also, the other thing that we've noticed is that we would like easier collaboration, as OCIO does so much collaboration with other projects in the software foundation, that it's actually becoming a little bit annoying to jump to a different Slack instance and back, especially for other folks that are trying to collaborate with OCIO. And so we are going to be moving to the ASWF's Slack instance. You'll notice already on the ASWF Slack instance, there is an OpenColorIO and an OpenColorIO configs channel. Those are existing today and free to join. We will be working on the migration process of that throughout the next couple weeks. But those are the two channels that you're welcome to join in the ASWF Slack, and we'll be phasing out the rest of the OCIO Slack instance over then over a set amount of time. We're in no rush to do that, but please join there for future OCIO discussions. Obviously, we've got lots of stuff going on all the time. We're not going to go through all of this slide, but we'll land on this slide again at the end of the presentation. But we do want to call out that we already have a few Slack channels on the ASWF Slack, namely the NanoColor and the Color Interop Forum Slack channel. Those already exist on the ASWF Slack and are collaboration projects with other areas of the Software Foundation. So please join those if you're interested in those projects. We'll be talking more about them later in the presentation. And then the rest of this is just useful links. If you don't already have it, you can get to all of it through our website. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Doug.
Thank you very much, Carol. So, as Carol said, OCIO 2.5 is coming out at the end of September. It will be the VFX platform release for next calendar year. And I'm going to run you through the new features in that. So, Carol is mastering the slides so that we have a smooth presentation, and so I'll ask her to advance the slides for me. So thank you. So as always, we have multiple things going on the project, and some of them are targeted for the upcoming release, and some of them are targeted for a future release. So I've kind of broken it down here. The ones on the right are things that are in progress that won't be in 2.5. The ones on the left are the things that we, sort of the major features that will be in 2.5, and I'm going to run you through each of those in more detail. So next slide, please, Carol. So before I do that, there is a ton of stuff that happens over the course of the year in this library to keep it running and healthy. We've sort of brought together a list of some of the PRs that have been merged over the past year. We just want to give a huge shout out and thanks to everyone who contributes to this library and keeps it healthy. And as Carol said, you know, we have a Dev Days event coming up in September. So if you're interested in contributing, please put that on your calendar. Next slide, please. So the first big feature is config merging. So this is something that has actually been in development for a couple of years now. It's gone through various prototypes. We feel it's finally ready to become part of the released library. And the the use case here is to enable a config to be built up from components to allow application. And there are several different use cases. So I'm just kind of listing three top ones here, but there are others. Another use case is to allow applications to transparently add required color spaces. A lot of software applications need to have various color spaces, and that means today they use the API to add them kind of under the hood. With the config merging, this will become like a more transparent process. So if an application needs to add something, color scientists can review what is going to be added and run the merge process and understand exactly what config is going to be running inside a given application. And finally, another use case is to make it simpler to add an existing LUT. Like if someone gives you a LUT, you want to add it to the ACES config, for example. So this PR is in review. We welcome your comments on it. Next slide, please. So another big feature is the hue curve transform. So I believe this is actually the first new transform that we've added since 2.0 5 years ago. So this completes the basic set of color correction transforms. So if you're not familiar, OCIO has a primary color correction, a tonal based color correction, RGB spline curves, and this adds hue based spline curves. So the graphic there kind of gives an idea of what could be done with this. You can adjust hue as a function of hue, saturation as a function of hue, saturation as a function of luminance, et cetera, et cetera. There's 8 different curves that are available. This is PR 2177. It's also in review. Next slide, please. Another big feature is Vulkan support. So if you haven't heard of Kronos Vulkan, this is a high performance GPU processing model. It's used in Autodesk Flame, Vred, many other modern apps that really want to take the utmost of the GPU performance. So Flame and Vred are both, mostly GPU-based applications, and so they're looking to get the absolute maximum performance out of a graphics card. And Vulkan is a great way of doing that. I want to call this out because supporting Vulkan requires us to make a small breaking change in the 2.5 API. So if you're using the GPU renderer, when you upgrade to 2.5, you will have to make a small adjustment in the code. We don't think this will be a big deal, but we just want to make sure that you're aware of it in advance. So that PR is 2176, and it's also in review right now. And so we've got a number of kind of small additions to the API that are related to putting additional metadata into an OCIO color space to support interop with different other color management systems or color standards or other libraries in the CG space. So I'm showing here a couple of the standards that we're trying to interoperate here with. So Carol's going to talk more about the Color Interop Forum recommendations. So this is a key part of interop with OpenUSD and Material X. So we're adding what's called an interop ID to color spaces that allow you to draw connections more easily and more reliably to standards like that. Also, ACES metadata files. So this is another thing that's been kind of in the works for a couple of years. We're waiting on sort of a finalized set of reference files for AMF, but we're trying to improve the AMF support. We've already got a prototype in OCIO, but we're looking to go beyond that. And finally, ICC profiles. So one thing that some application needs to do if they're exporting a file like a TIFF file or a JPEG file and they're using ICC profiles to tag the file format with the color space, they need to draw a connection between a display color space in the OCIO config and a specific ICC profile that they're going to use to tag that file. So we're looking to add that metadata to the config file as well. And as I mentioned, this won't be in 2.5, but we want to keep it on people's radar. The Common LUT format is a collaboration between the Academy and the American Society of Cinematographers. It supports, LUT is a little bit of a misnomer because it actually supports the different OCIO operators there, LUT1D, LUT3D, exponent, log, CDL, matrix, range. So this is has been winding its way through the SMPTE process for over a year, and we're looking forward to that coming out this fall, and when it does, we'll be supporting it in OCIO. So one of the great things and that's really encouraging is to see major applications supporting OpenColorIO. So um, I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of the apps we show here that are recent additions to the OCIO family. So Photoshop, obviously, we're going to have a demo, and same for Flame. Disguise is a big app in the virtual production space, and Autodesk Red is high-end GPU renderer that's real-time renderer that's used for automotive and product design. So with that, I'll pass it back to Carol to introduce the demos.
Yeah, awesome. So the first one we're going to do is hear from Cody Queller, who's at Adobe, about their OCIO implementation in Photoshop, and we're super excited about that. So let me get this video playing.
Carol, we're not hearing the audio.
Um, Interesting. I am hearing the audio on my end. We're going to try this again.
Cuellar, and I'm a senior engineer at Adobe. I'd like to showcase Photoshop's
Right
native
now?
OCIO integration for improved color workflows and ACES support. The first thing you're going to want to do when you open Photoshop to enable OCIO is to come up to Edit, go to OpenColorIO settings, and ensure that Enable OpenColorIO features is checked. When you do that, it will provide a bunch of default options here, so you can choose the default configs, default working space, and document depth. When we hit OK, we will now have access to a few new OpenColorIO menu items. Now we have three ways to get an OpenColorIO document. We have new OpenColorIO, which will create a blank document, open an existing file as an OpenColorIO document, or if we have a file already open, we could go to Edit, Convert to OpenColorIO. So we will open as OpenColorIO, and we'll choose an EXR. And when you hit OK here, you'll see a new dialog pop up that pre-populates based on the defaults we set in the settings dialog, and then we can choose an input color space for the file I'm opening. This does attempt to select based on path rules defined inside of a config, otherwise it'll use a best guess based on file format. In this case it got it correct, so we'll hit OK. Once we're there, there's a new panel, Window, OpenColorIO. You get your panel where you can see the configuration, you can change your working space, your display, your view, and at the bottom you have exposure and gamma controls for the viewer itself, which do not affect the composite, and each of those can be toggled on and off. And one thing you'll notice over here in the layers, the layer was brought in as a smart object, and the reason we do this is so that we can dynamically map the input color space. So if I come in here and change it, you'll see that it looks incorrect. So when I open the file, if I got it wrong, I can just come in here and I can set it to the correct color space and we'll do the correct math into the working space. The other thing is if you ever were to change the working space, everything will work correctly no matter what the working space is because we recalculate that transform. And you can see this if we go to raw. Right now it's being converted to ACES CCT, and now it's being converted to ACES 2065. So once you know this is correct, you can always right click the layer, rasterize layer, and now it's baked into the working space. If you were to change the working space, the math will no longer work out, so things won't look correct, but as long as you're not changing the working space, you can rasterize the layer and then go in and do operations like smudge or clone stamp directly on the pixels. If we undo that and we go back to the smart object, we can just see by bringing in a few different layers. Let's bring in another layer that's a different color space. We'll hit OK. This one didn't come in correctly right out of the gate, but if I click on that smart object layer and I come down here and switch it to the correct color space, now it matches and it looks correct. The next feature we have is OpenColorIO transforms as adjustment layers. So we can add a adjustment layer transform, and we have 4 different types of transforms: color space, display transform, CDL are named. So we can do just basic color space transforms. You can flip them, so you can do things like do a color space transform, do some operation, or put a new layer in there. And then you can come up here and flip it to reverse the transform. So these are inverses of each other. The CDL you can load from a file, or you can manually come down here and apply the adjustments to the RGB channels or the individual channels themselves. We have different name transforms defined in this config we can use for utility purposes. And another one that's really nice is having a display transform available in the composite stack here as an adjustment layer. What this allows you to do is you can turn it off at the view level, and I can come in here and I can choose my display view as an actual adjustment layer, which allows me to now save a copy, and I can save it directly to a JPEG with that transform baked in, because the viewer settings here do not affect files that are saved out. One of the other things we can do if we want to convert this to an ICC based document is, first let's get rid of our color transform there. We'll go to edit, duplicate to profile, and now we can choose the appropriate display and view transform, and we can apply appropriate ICC profile that matches that display. We can go to 16-bit now, hit OK, and now I have an ICC based document that no longer has OCIO features, and it has a display view transform baked into it. This is just some of what you can do with native OCIO integration in Photoshop. We're continuing to expand and improve OCIO integration and have exciting new features in this area on the horizon. We can't wait to see what studios are able to do with Photoshop while leveraging their high-end color workflows with OCIO.
Awesome. Super, super exciting. And now we're going to hear a nice recording of our Doug talking about Flame.
This is Autodesk Flame. Flame is a high-end visual effects and finishing system. It's a timeline-based app, and one of the things that it's used for is doing the final online editorial for movies and TV shows. It also is used for visual effects, and if we jump into the procedural compositing environment here, and I'll zoom in, I've got a simple demo for you here. One of the things that is interesting about Flame is that it allows you to work with the media in its original color space. In other words, you don't have to convert to a common working space unless you want to. And I'm going to show you how that works. Flame tags each clip with its color space so it knows how to view it correctly in the viewport. So I'm going to bypass the viewport color management here, and you'll see this is what an unmanaged scene linear clip looks like. I'm using an OCIO color space transform here to convert to log color space, and a display view transform to convert to a video color space. So if I turn the viewport color management back on, you'll note that the view transform menu here is using a different viewing transform for video clips than it is for log or scene linear clips. So in this case, it's using an ACES 2.0 view transform for the scene linear and log. I'll also just point out quickly that the menus here are hierarchical menus driven by the color space family, and that the color space categories are used to allow config authors to use different color spaces for a working space versus input color space menus. And the transform viewer panel here allows you to see the actual OpenColorIO operators that are being applied for any given transformation. So you might wonder, well, so how does Flame know for a video color space to use a different view transform? And that is all driven by the OCIO viewing rules. So we'll jump into the color management preferences here. A few things worth noting are the display menu here, which you set your OCIO display for each monitor. The Sync with OS button allows you to use an ICC profile. This is controlled by the OCIO virtual display. We have the OCIO file rules here. You can create rules right from the user interface. This is showing the shared views in the config. So this is an ACES 2 config. It has lots of view transforms. You can use the user interface to delete or mute views. You can create new views. If someone brings in a LUT, you can create a new view for the LUT. You can browse to the LUT file, set the input and output color space, and add that. You can so the allowed color spaces menu here is driven by OCIO viewing rules, controls which views get used with which color spaces. You can control the looks. So this is showing the looks that are available in this config file. This first look has a shot-based first view has a shot-based CC look associated to it. So all of the editing that is done in the user interface here does not modify the original config. So these are stored in a separate file that are merged on top of the original config. And this is very useful for Flame artists, but in a facility where there's a color scientist who's got a specific config that they want to use, it's possible to lock this down so that these edits are not possible from the user interface. Another thing I'll show quickly if we jump into the timeline tab here. I've got a very simple timeline with just 3 shots on it, and Flame supports OCIO context variables. So if you're familiar with those are a way of doing shot-specific looks. So with this shot, here's a look that's on this shot. This shot has a different look, and then this last shot has a third look to it. So if we jump into the color management editor here, we go into the context variables. You can see that this shot has the shot variable set to 3. This one is to 1. This one's set to 2. So you can control these from the user interface, but in practice, if you had a timeline with hundreds of shots, you would use the Flame Python binding to assign context variables to each shot based on the metadata of the shot. And this is a very powerful way of controlling looks through OCIO on the timeline. So that's a whirlwind tour of OCIO support in Autodesk Flame.
Awesome.
This is Autodesk Flame.
And now we're going to talk roadmap. I'll hand it back to Doug.
Right, thanks. I hope those demos were interesting to give people a sense of the work that goes into the various apps and trying to support the different features that OCIO offers. You should also mention probably that After Effects, Adobe After Effects, also supports OpenColorIO, as do a number of other Autodesk applications. So it's really each application kind of presents its own challenges and own opportunities. So we thought it would be interesting to give you a sense of what OCIO looks like in a couple of new applications. So with that, we'll jump into the roadmap. So if we go to the next slide. So our release, as Carol said, is September 30th. So it's almost 2 months away. And so we're still kind of pulling various things together. And so what we're giving you today is our best guess at what is going to be in 2.5. But We have various resources online that you can use to check the progress. And one of them is roadmap.openColorIO.org. It gives you kind of the now, next, later list of features that, so now are things that we're working on, next are things that have been spec'd and upcoming, and later are things that are kind of on our radar. So that's a great resource that you can check throughout the year to understand what's happening. And if we go to the next slide, so we have a milestone set up. So the URL there on the bottom shows you the milestone for our milestone page. And within that, you can see the OCIO 2.5.0 milestone. This has specific issues or pull requests that are in progress. So if you want the sort of latest and greatest as we get closer to September 30th, you can use this resource to track our progress. And with that, I'll pass it back to Carol to talk about the Color Interop Forum.
Yeah, so the Color Interop Forum, just as a reminder, the Color Interop Forum is an initiative that we started, I mean, over a year ago now, because we did talk about this last year, but it was new last year when we talked about it. It's meant to be a cross-project open space to discuss interoperability of color workflows and standards. That's the last I'm going to read of this slide. So we wanted to remind everybody that this forum exists and it's meant to be there whether or not you're using OpenColorIO for color management. Obviously, we as OCIO participate in this forum and help run it and help drive initiatives that are important to us as OCIO in cross-project interoperability. So you will see a lot of OCIO in the Color Interop Forum because it's very important to us as a project to drive actually like interoperable color management forward overall as an industry. And if we as OCIO can help do that, that is part of our goal. So the first initiative that we did was publish a set of recommendations of color space encodings for texture assets and CG rendering. And yes, we realize that is a mouthful. It is meant to be a set of standardized, common, scene-referred color spaces used in assets and CG rendering. And some of them you can sort of see behind this QR code that I've put in here. None of them will be a surprise. They're all very standard color spaces that everybody uses every day. This is an attempt to standardize them, put them out there, the math behind them, and you can access this white paper officially on our Color Interop GitHub. It is now published and by this QR code. So we're working on some other things. The next initiative we're working on is the same type of initiative in standardizing color spaces, but this time for displays. So standard display color spaces, things like an sRGB display, a BT1886 display, and all of those different types of displays that we all use all the time. This draft is in its first stages. It's ready for review. And so this QR code will take you to a Google Doc where you can leave comments. We would like to publish this and incorporate this into the next release of OCIO 2.5 at the end of September. So we would appreciate folks' prompt feedback on these initiatives, this one and the others that we're going to talk through after this slide. But have a look, leave your feedback, come to a meeting, talk to us about it. We really want to make sure that we're not missing any displays, that we're getting people's workflows correct, etc. The next one we want to talk about is Doug mentioned earlier in the presentation, an ID for color interop. And again, we have a QR code. This spec is also in draft stage, but it is up and ready for folks' comment. And as Doug mentioned before, we realize that we need a mechanism for defining a color space string for interoperability between different libraries, for example, we list on this slide USD, Material X. We're going to talk about OpenEXR in the next slide. And different applications in a standard way for us to identify a color space based on a string. In a lot of these, oftentimes in a lot of these common color spaces that we talked about in the first initiative that we published, a really solid way for engineers and artists and application developers to rely on accurate metadata from an OCIO config or OCIO application. That's really what we're attempting to do here. It's not an easy thing. So we really need your feedback. We really want to make sure that this is going to work for everybody, especially if you're, an application developer or a maintainer of another library that we haven't talked to about this yet. We would like to hear from you and make sure that we're covering your use cases. One main use case for this initiative is the use of identifying a color space in an OpenEXR file. As we're all familiar, there are existing methods for identifying a color space in an EXR file by using the chromaticities attribute. Also, lots of applications write their own color space metadata, whether that be a name or something else, into an OpenEXR file currently because it's very flexible. But what the reality of the situation is that the trust in the chromaticities attribute is lost. And lots of applications handle it or don't handle it differently. Many pipelines that we all write simply ignore it if it exists in an EXR header. And it's a tough one because it's a set of many numbers that are foreign and very hard to diagnose if something is wrong. So what we're proposing is a new standard attribute in OpenEXR, and you can come to the OpenEXR town hall later too to talk to the OpenEXR team about this with us. And that will be in the next release. And this QR code takes you to yet another draft in a Google Doc ready for your feedback around how we're thinking about this attribute, how you read and write and update and inspect this attribute and all the different ways that of which this could be um, difficult. And we realize that we're introducing lots of new stuff here and lots of new things, and that it's going to be, in my mind, a multi-year process to get this all implemented into applications and libraries and in user workflows. And so we're starting now. We're adding these things in. We'd like to get it in OCIO 2.5 such that we don't have to wait another year in order to get these features into application developers' hands, which means it's a delay in getting it to users' hands. So that is why if it feels like we're pushing through a lot and announcing a lot in this town hall, it's because we are. And we would love for you all to come to the Color Interrupt Forum meetings to discuss this. We also have our Slack channel as a reminder if you'd like to, and then please leave feedback on the Google Docs asynchronously. And I think that's it for the Color Interrupt. And now we'll talk about Nanocolor.
Right. So Nanocolor is something that we introduced last year at ASWF Open Source Days. And if we go to the next slide, this is the charter that we published last year. To recap, this is a collaboration between OpenUSD, MaterialX, and OpenColorIO to work on color management in pipelines that involve these three important standards. So it's something that we have a working group that meets every other week. This has been a great collaboration working with these other projects. I know we had a great collaboration with OpenFX last year, and this has been a really terrific effort to reach out to these other projects and collaborate on color management related topics. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to summarize kind of the progress in the three projects. So in OpenUSD, starting last year, there were a number of new color space classes that were introduced. So GF Color, GF Color Space. As of 2508, which is the latest USD release, it just came out last week, I think. There are new color tests, unit tests for the color space conversions. GF Color and GF Color Space support the Color Interrupt Forum recommendations for texture color spaces that Carol mentioned. There are new functions, USD Color Space API and USD Color Space Definition API that came out earlier this year that allow you to define color spaces, custom color spaces, and to if you have a prim in a USD file, you can ask for the color space of that prim based on the hierarchy within USD. So AOUSD is an initiative to standardize, create an ISO specification for USD, and that now supports the Color Interrupt Forum color spaces. And there is a very informative user's guide and a programmer's guide for color in USD that I've put the links to there at the bottom. Next slide, please. So Material X, some exciting new additions here. So if you saw the Material X town hall yesterday, Jonathan Stone mentioned this. So there is now the ability to use OCIO to color manage Material X. So if you're using the Material X shader generator to generate like GLSL code, for example, to render material, you can now use OCIO to do the color space conversions. This will be new in Material X 1.39.4, which is due to release soon. This was a contribution from Jerry Gamache at Autodesk, and with some great comments from Lee Curley at Apple as well on that. So it's been a great collaboration. Jerry also has a PR to add the color interrupt form aliases for existing color spaces. There's a Material X file that is designed to test all the different ways you can define a color space in a Material X document. That was shared in the NanoColor Slack channel. Reach out to us if you're interested in that. You know, after SIGGRAPH, we've got some other things on the horizon to you know, further improve color space handling in Material X. So that was really great to see all the developments. And on the OCIO side, as Carol mentioned, we published the Color Interrupt Forum recommendations. We've got the new Color Interrupt ID attribute that we're collaborating on with OpenEXR and OpenImageIO as well. And finally, the OCIO NanoColor library. We published a prototype of that last year. It's in a branch on the OCIO GitHub. Let us know if you're interested in that. Right now, we're working on a white paper to kind of fully specify all of the aspects and requirements for this, and that's going to drive the next steps in that project. And with that, I will pass it back to Carol.
And I'm going to pass it over to Kevin Wheatley, who is one of our TSC members for OpenColorIO. He's at Framestore, and he's going to talk about all the work that he and others did for ACES 2.0 in OCIO since we last spoke.
Yes, as is previously mentioned, obviously OCIO supports a number of ACES-related technologies. I'm going to focus on the work that was done to the view transforms or the display renderings, depending where you come from. If we go to the next slide, this slide sort of shows how we incorporated ACES 2.0 into various releases of OCIO. Initially, we had 2.4.0, which was from the OCIO point of view, was considered a preview of ACES 2.0. We were kind of one of the first implementers, and as such, we were able to give our feedback to the ACES output transforms working group, which coincidentally I was also involved in. And we worked together on what became the 2.4.2 modifications. The goal of the whole exercise was to improve the performance and generally preserve the look and feel of the output transform, but hopefully to simplify the code so that both OCIO and anybody else's implementations could take advantage of it. The changes were incorporated into OCIO 2.4.2, and those were then backported to the official ACES CTL code. So we consider basically OCIO 2.4.2 to be the official ACES 2.0 output transform from the OCIO implementation point of view. And obviously going forwards to 2.5, we would hope that we would be able to include any bug fixes or improvements that we come up with. So next slide, please. So as I say, the original 2.4.0 was a preview. It was very much following the original CTL. It was made heavy use of textures on the GPU path, and the sort of changes that we were making were for 2.4.2 were basically algorithmic and core code optimizations to simplify all code paths. So both GPU and CPU in OCIO plus anybody else's implementation. We had a goal of texture free. Unfortunately, we didn't meet that, at least within OCIO. As we suggested, we did not end up with a strict numerical match. We couldn't guarantee that, but the result is very, very close between the two, especially for SDR outputs. And even when differences do occur, the differences are visually quite subtle. As I say, all the changes that we came up with for the CTL for OCIO were added to the CTL repository, so we do match the official renders. And from an ACES perspective, any other implementers have been encouraged to incorporate those same changes into their own things. So interoperability will hopefully follow across the board. I should say, before we move on to the next slide, this work was partly myself, partly a number of contributors, and so yeah, the numbers you're about to see are not mine. They're from many different people. So go to the next slide, please. So as part of the work, obviously we're aiming to make things faster. So this graph, whilst it's a bit messy, it's just taking the visual look of the graph and nothing else. The smaller lines show the ACES1 code performance, and the larger lines show, unfortunately, this ACES2 code performance. As you can see, ACES2 is slower. It's a more complicated transform, and so we expected it to be slower. A part of this first round of optimizations was basically to transform the green bar into the red bar. So it is a result of taking several runs of OCIO perf and basically coming up with mean results. The ACES1 results were for my confirmation that we had not changed the behavior because of some compile settings. It is just like effectively it's the same across all the results. So and there are more results than these, but if we move on to the next slide, it's basically a good summary of where we got to. Just looking at the kind of algorithmic changes, as you can see, we made, like, on average, it's 16% faster or so, but in some cases it's much greater than that. In some cases it's less, depends very much on the CPU and the context in which you're running. Particularly the build I made there was, I built once and ran it across many different CPUs on different OSs, etc. If we move to the next slide, this is perhaps the more interesting slide for some people. I did nothing. The OS made it go quicker by more than the changes. Now, it's not quite true. We understand how this happened. And I think it's worth bearing in mind that for those of you out there that are running a Red Hat or similar Linux release, there are changes that are made in both the Red Hat release process and similar for the other OSs distributions. Which means that you might see a bigger improvement simply by doing an OS upgrade, because the underlying glibc has some patches and fixes, and the base OS has got architectural requirements that the compilers can take advantage of that can give you a bigger win. For best results, combining both will give you both the OCIO 2.4.2 and the new OS improvements. You get the best result, and then as you can see, it sort of does start to bring the two within the realms, the ACES1 and ACES2 results within realms of kind of them being similar. So if we move to the next slide, it's worth saying, obviously, these are all CPU results, but the GPU results have seen similar performance improvements of a 20 to 40% reduction, depending on your exact work case. There's some links on the OCIO GitHub wiki that kind of show the sort of interim results if anyone's really interested in that. I think one thing that I would say is we'd like some more feedback about where to or how important tackling the any future optimizations, particularly AVX2 or AVX for CPU. I think maybe we could get another 2 times performance speed up, if because the current code is pretty much dependent on the compiler doing its own vectorization, and I think by hand tuning we could probably improve things, but that's not an insignificant amount of work, so it'd be definitely worth understanding if that's important to people. And I think that's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. I'm gonna blast through. I know we're short on time. I knew this was going to happen. We've had a lot to get through today, but we're going to talk a little bit about configs. As a reminder, OCIO supports 3 types of configs for different use cases, all based on ACES. Based on ACES because ACES is a great partner with us and another open source color management system that we can implement into OCIO easily. And so these are meant to be base configs, examples of workflows, starting points for you in your workflows. They're not meant to be 100% problem solvers at any given time, but they're meant to show a good implementation of ACES and what's possible in OCIO in the configs as we add them. So they're examples of as we add new features like we're going to this time, those will be in the new configs. In the same way that we do for the rest of the library, we track our release milestones for the ACES configs. This is on a separate repository, the OpenColorIO config ACES repository, but it lives under the milestone for the 2.5 config release. And you can see lots of stuff listed here. So if you ever want to see a detailed look at what we're kind of doing and prioritizing, this is where it lives. I want to call out a few main things that we really would like to get people looking at and aware of. So one of the things that we're looking at doing for this next release of configs is changes to how we handle our negative values in display color spaces. Currently, we clamp them in a basic way. We're proposing mirroring them instead. This is already in effect in a couple of our display color spaces, PQ and HLG. This is a proposal to move this behavior to our other display color spaces that could utilize it for video workflows that need to take advantage of expanded range in certain circumstances. This is a change in behavior. So we would like everybody to be aware of it. That when we release this, it will cause some of your configs to behave differently. And so we want applications to be aware of it that ship with these configs, and we want users to be aware of it. Do we anticipate a ton of issues with it? No, but we also we want this fix out. We consider this sort of like a thing we should do and probably should have done before. And so we're going to do this now. We're adding a couple display spaces, namely Rec79 Gamma 2.2. We're adding input transform of DJI log and dgamut to the next round of configs. Please keep feedback coming on things like this, additions that you think are standard things that should be in our ACES configs that we ship. We try and keep up for the most part with everything that is in ACES. We make some different decisions based on our needs for the studio and CG configs, which have different use cases. But in the reference config, we've kind of got everything implemented for the most part. We try and keep up, but there are a decent amount of input color spaces that we're not sure if folks need, and need a built-in transform for these in OpenColorIO for our particular use cases. So the way that we judge this and the way that we prioritize getting these color spaces in is feedback from the community. There are a million things we could be working on. We prioritize based on what we hear from our users and from our DCC implementers on what would help them achieve the results they need. As a reminder, with this next round of configs for 2.5, the ACES 2.0 output transforms that Kevin was just talking about and these new rounds of configs will be built into the OCIO library. They are not currently. So that's the last major thing that will happen with configs related in 2.5. And I know that was a lot. I don't think technically have time for questions, but if anybody wants to sneak one in, you definitely can. And then obviously we'll be available via Slack and also at our Birds of a Feather at SIGGRAPH next week if you're in person. We'll also be having a little social event later in the evening if you would like to stop by. And I'll leave this slide up while we kind of wrap up here and for how to get in touch with us and when our meetings are and all of that jazz.
Carol, there was just one question about the Photoshop and Flame recordings be available as standalone videos afterwards.
That is up to them. They'll definitely obviously be a part of this recording. But we can talk about that and whether that's worthwhile to have separately in some
Yeah,
way.
there is. I'll mention that there is a on the Learning channel on YouTube. There already is a intro to OCIO Flame video there. The one that we showed today is a little bit more technical for OCIO developer kind of audience. Um, but yeah, if you know you need a separate version of it, please let us know on Slack.
All right. Come join us on the ASWF Slack, join our channels, make them happy, and hopefully we'll see a decent amount of you in Vancouver. Please come up and say hello and introduce yourself if you see. I know Doug and I love to meet everybody from the OCIO community that we don't get a chance to interact with all the time. So
Definitely.
come and say hi.
Yeah, say hi at SIGGRAPH. And thanks everyone for joining us today.